Lance Says podcast, recording at night, 7 o'clock on this Wednesday, February 22nd of 2023. It's available live at twitch.tv/Gallant Says or youtube.com/Paul Gallant. We're going to do it tonight and tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Central Time, trying to see where the biggest possible audience we can get for Twitch and for YouTube is, but it's also available in podcast form. You probably know that if you've subscribed already, but if you haven't, and maybe you're a podcast person, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Houston Astros are at spring training in West Palm Beach, Florida, and we got some bad news already, though it's not really surprising news. It has to do with Lance McCullers, the Astros right-handed pitcher who has had Tommy John surgery before, has dealt with injury issues a lot over the course of his career. Here he is with Jason Bristol of KHOU talking about the most recent setback he's dealt with.
For the year, felt like was in an amazing spot physically and got to camp early. Threw a bullpen here last Tuesday, and unfortunately, after that bullpen, nothing during the bullpen raised any red flags. Just after the bullpen, into the evening and then to the next day, it's had some elbow soreness and things of that nature. And we've been obviously I've been a little bit upset. I was really looking forward to a great start to the camp and great start to the season. And anytime this happens, it's very frustrating for me, especially for our team, our fan base. And I just wanted to have, a great year and get off to a great start. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. So, taking a couple days to, collect myself and our thoughts. And it's not something serious. We had an MRI last night. We went ahead and did an MRI, and everything was structurally good. Probably best case scenario, my UCL was good. Just a small muscle strain, and it's going to set me back a little bit, but it shouldn't be anything like last year. It should be something where hopefully I'm playing catch in a couple weeks.
Hopefully I'm playing catch in a couple of weeks. He finishes off. You hope it doesn't go all the way towards the very end of the season for him. Look, I feel for Lance McCullers, first of all. This is something he's dealt with on the regular, and this is something that's largely out of his control. You can't stop your body from falling apart on you. You can rehab it, and you can hope for the best, but genetics determine a lot of this, and the wear and tear that you put on an elbow and arm when you've got some of the filthy stuff that Lance McCullers brings to the table, it's going to lend itself to shit like this. So I feel for him. And I also will say that it's not that big of an issue for the Houston Astros. I think, in fact, it presents a great opportunity for Hunter Brown to kick the training wheels off and perhaps get some opportunities to actually start in a rotation that already features Framber Valdez, who was a Cy Young Award finalist, Christian Javier, a guy who in walks, hits per innings pitched, and strikeouts through 9. Had he qualified with a couple more innings pitched, he would have been among baseball's leaders in both of those categories. It's a guy who's been the starter for multiple combined no-hitters this year, including one in the World Series. You have Luis Garcia, you have Jose Urquidy. There are a lot of things that the Astros have that make it so that a potential long period of time without Lance McCullers isn't going to be a problem. But that brings us to something that I think it's discussed regularly in sports radio, and it has bothered me. I saw a couple of people making the comments, well, that's Lance McCullers for you. He's glass. And I fucking hate hearing that. I really do. If you aren't able to play due to injury, should we hold it against you? It's a derogatory way to describe someone, and this person has no fucking control over whether or not he's hurt. This is true for a lot of athletes. Freak accidents happen where someone can get injured. Injuries can happen due to wear and tear. as we obviously get older, our bodies stop being perhaps the efficient machines that they are when we're all growing up. I'm sure all of you, when you get out of bed in the morning, your knees creak, you don't feel great. But this is something that we hear a lot in the world of sports, and I fucking hate that not only do we hear it, but we hear it from a lot of the people in my industry. And I guess far be it from me to shame others in sports talk radio, but generally speaking, what does the average sports talk show host look like? I thought it was very funny the first time that I met some listeners in public where they told me, wow, you're a lot different than I imagined, because I think they all thought that I was older and that I was probably out of shape. It's kind of what the stereotype is of people in our industry. And perhaps it's fair. We are the ones that spout our mouths off the most. And I think with sports radio hosts, you're going to get people who will call an athlete soft or glass or something like that. And you hear conversation like that amongst friends. I just fucking hate it. Because I feel like if you are an athlete, you're being paid professionally to play a sport. I mean, you're in the top 1%. It's probably even a smaller percentage than that. And there are folks who out there will say, yeah, he's soft or something like that. And that one is where we got to figure out an actual definition. Everyone has a different pain tolerance. And some athletes are able to play exceptionally well while hurt. This happens in football a lot. How many quarterbacks are 100% at the end of a year? Very few, right? Getting smacked around by 300-pound defensive linemen 30 to 40 times a year at least. In terrible situations like David Carr had, you could be getting sacked 70 times or something like that and hit even more on the plays that you don't get sacked. It adds up. Quarterbacks, though they do now flop a little bit and look for calls from referees and are significantly more protected than they were in years past, quarterbacks have to be tough. You're the leader of the team. You're the highest paid player on the team. The team goes as you go. And there are moments where even if you are banged up, you're probably better than the backup who comes in for you. After that, who is the next toughest player? I think offensive linemen are pretty damn tough. Take a look at their hands. Defensive linemen. But I'm sticking to football. And then you get into some other sports like basketball where flopping is rampant. Soccer where flopping is rampant. And that's where we start to dive into that soft conversation. Those who won't play at slightly less than 100% in baseball. It's an 162-game season. That also can lend itself to someone getting that label of soft. J.D. Drew is a baseball player who made a shit ton of money over the course of his career. But over the course of that career, there were many times where folks were frustrated over the fact that if he was less than 100%, and we're talking like 99%, 98%, at least based off of their estimations of how he was feeling, these people would essentially say, yeah, he's soft because of that. And it's understandable to an extent. I mean, if you're just slightly less than 100%, you're not going to go and you're getting paid all of this money. I could totally get why people perhaps put that label on somebody, but we do need to have some legitimate rules for it. And it's impossible, I guess, to 100% know whether or not a player is banged up or whether or not a player is having a tough time playing through an injury or something like that. But it's definitely something that I hate hearing, especially that glass label. Imagine if someone saw you broke your arm. Oh, you're fucking glass, you pussy, or something like that. I mean, would you want to be called that? And there's like a casual way with which we call people that. And I know I've heard it before, and I just get a little bit more annoyed when I see the people that generally throw that stuff out there. Whether it's like someone like Booger Balls 42069 online, he's probably some fat slob that's like living on Twitter. Sorry to fat shame here, but I mean, who's soft? Is it the person who is not 100% and not able to play, or is it the person that's panting heavily as they're walking up the stairs? It's the latter. You are actually literally soft in some of those situations. I hope we're better about it. And as far as Lance McCullers, I feel bad for him because this is a label that is starting to stick to Lance McCullers, the last one specifically. I don't know if people are going to call him soft per se, but you can't control whether or not you're injured. You can't control whether or not you're 100%. Something else I wanted to talk about. It's been one of the hottest topics in the sports world over the last couple of days. It's what's going on with the Alabama basketball program with a former player, Darius Miles, who provided the weapon to Michael Davis, a non-Alabama basketball player, who shot and killed 23-year-old Jamia Harris, the mother of one, outside of a bar in Tuscaloosa. Stories like this are easy to speculate about because you're relying on police investigations with details in said police investigations that are being made public. But not all of those details are being made public. And lots of people have varying opinions on the Alabama basketball program, which no matter how you feel, you have to admit they've handled this very poorly. Whether it's Nate Oates, the head coach of Alabama basketball, publicly seeking out Ray Lewis's advice on a player that may have been connected to a murder. It's something that Ray Lewis, of course, faced an obstruction of justice charge probably 20 plus years ago. Shoot, we're getting close to 25 years. I think it was 2000 when it took place in Atlanta, Georgia. These are not the way that you want, I think, people to start paying attention to your basketball program and zeroing in. But that's how things started off with the Alabama basketball program. So here are the details that we do know. We know that Darius Miles is off the team. We know that his friend from childhood, Michael Davis, both of them are being charged, it seems like, with capital murder. And we know that Nate Oates, the head coach of Alabama basketball, had this blunder in a press conference where he was asked about Miles and another player, one of the best players in the country, a guy who might be a top 5 pick, Brandon Miller, his involvement in said situation. Here is Nate Oates.
There is a situation. Just how comfortable were you with his proximity to that, and also if there's any NBA scouts who might be inquiring, what would you say to them about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've known the situation since span. We've been fully cooperating with law enforcement the entire time. I mean, it's the whole situation's sad. I mean, you just think of it. Team closed practice with a prayer for the situation today. Again, knowing that we had this trial today, I mean, you think of Jamia and her family and Kane. Really think about her son Kane that was left behind. So it's sad. We knew about that. I mean, can't control everything anybody does outside of practice. Nobody knew that was going to happen.
Pause for a second. He starts rambling, and when he says that, a lot of people have jumped on it and said it's callous. He's not wrong, though. I mean, he can't control what his players are doing when they're not on the practice court, when they're not on the game court. And I do think it's important also to note that it's not like he doesn't seem to be extremely, sad about the entire situation. Of course, these are optics. You're in front of a microphone. Is this callous or tone deaf here? No. But the problem is he kept talking, and it does start to sound a little bit worse the longer and longer that Nate Oates, the head coach of Alabama basketball, rambled.
College kids are out. Brandon hasn't been in any type of trouble, nor has he in any type of trouble on this case. Like, in the wrong spot at the wrong time. So we'll address it when I'm sure NBA scouts will ask. They do their homework, but yeah, think the article that it came out, it also stated Brandon's been interviewed. He's, they're comfortable with everything that happened there.
So that's Nate Oates again, the head coach of Alabama basketball. People are crushing him for this. Again, not an ideal look, and you add in the reaching out to Ray Lewis for advice on this situation and many other details that have come out, and it's hard to give Alabama a pass for this. And I'm not trying to defend Nate Oates here, but I'm also saying at the same time, I think that when you look at what he's saying, there was something correct along the way. Like, he can't control what these guys are doing off the court. That's not making an excuse for what they do. So there's a lot of controversy over Brandon Miller's involvement. Darius Miles, his gun was used by Michael Davis to shoot at least 8 shots at a car with Jamia Harris, who was killed in the shooting, inside. And this is where it gets tricky, because Darius Miles asked Alabama freshman Brandon Miller to bring him the gun. I guess Brandon Miller drove Darius Miles to the bars, dropped him off. And the way that things escalated to the point where Michael Davis, an acquaintance of Darius Miles, shot, again, at least 8 times at a car with Jamia Harris inside of it. Her boyfriend and her cousin were inside it as well. Started off because Davis, after leaving the club, was dancing outside the late Harris's car. From the sound of things, per her boyfriend, he tried to speak to her. Her boyfriend and Davis, seems like they had a verbal altercation. Things got elevated per the boyfriend. And Davis said, "You don't know who I am and what I do." Yikes. So after this went down, and you have to assume some alcohol was involved here, Darius Miles texted Brandon Miller, "I need my joint." Apparently, joint is gun. That's what Darius Miles was trying to get. So Miller brought it. The gun was in a hat, at least based off of, I think, one of the text messages that Miles had texted Miller. And a lot of people, I think, are making the assumption that Brandon Miller would have known that Darius Miles was about to use the gun. I'm going to throw out a hypothetical here. This is speculation. I don't know the details. But it sounds like there's a chance that Brandon Miller realized that Darius Miles had left Darius Miles' gun in the back seat or somewhere in the car. If someone texted you that they'd left something in your car, you'd probably want to return it, right? Maybe you're not going to do it right away. But if it's someone else's gun, I think you're going to return it really fucking quickly. Again, speculation. I don't know that those are the actual details there. But something to think about as a possibility as to why Miller brought the gun to Darius Miles. There's a lot of judgment online commentary about how Miller should have known, since his friends were drinking, that the only reason to, I guess, have him bring one of those guns is because they wanted to use the gun. Okay, maybe. We're talking about late high school to college-aged kids here, so judgment is not exactly something I'm expecting that they're going to have a great deal of. And I would also just think that if somebody left his gun in your car, you would want that thing out of your car as soon as possible. But I don't know all the details. I only can go off of what has been released by the Tuscaloosa Police Department. So Brandon Miller dropped Miles off at the club. He didn't stay because the line was too long. But at the actual scene of the shooting, 2 vehicles, a Dodge Charger and a Dodge Challenger, one of them belonged to Brandon Miller. The other one belonged to another Alabama basketball player, Jaden Bradley. They were blocking the road where the Jeep that was shot at, where Jamia Harris was killed, it was blocking the road. And we do know that Jaden Bradley was at the scene of the shooting. It's surprising that there has been a declaration that Brandon Miller wasn't there. I guess they do have this on video. Perhaps he truly wasn't actually at the scene of the shooting. He has not been charged. I think a lot of people are wondering why. You do have to remember that you're not the one that's doing the crime investigation, and that sometimes details don't all come out at once, and sometimes police is going to keep details to itself, at least until formal charges are perhaps made. Tuscaloosa Chief Deputy District Attorney Paula Whitley was asked why Brandon Miller wasn't charged. She said, "That's not a question I can answer. There's nothing we could charge him with, according to the law," she said. The first part's interesting, though, because I feel like that means that there's still perhaps a chance that Miller could be charged. Lots of assumptions get made when stories like this are released, and I think that now that information comes to us so quickly, we're of the belief that all of that information is actually what happened, that we don't need to think long and hard about what details are true, what details can be verified. And this is one of the things about online discourse that really sucks. This has turned into assumptions being made about the frame of mind of these athletes. And I want to make it clear, this is not a defense of Brandon Miller, especially not Darius Miles or Michael Davis, the latter of whom both seemed to be drunk, and one asked for a gun while drunk and the other shot a gun 8 times while drunk. Like, best case scenario, which is really fucked up to say too, right? Like, oh, Michael Davis, per the police reports, claimed that he had had a lot of tequila and doesn't even remember anything that had happened. Jesus Christ on that front. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of things to point at and say this is fucked up, and these kids fucked up / young adults fucked up. They are young men. I suppose you're 18 plus. We should be looking at you with a very intense eyebrow raised. And, you know, there's lots of questions about gun safety along the way, blah, 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 blah. All I want to say is in this situation, it does feel like a lot of people are jumping to conclusions here. And the tricky thing is, with stories like this, everyone wants to do it right away. But the reality is that more details will come out, and this is a story you should pay attention to. I mean, I don't want to make an apples to orange comparison to say that these two situations were the same, but didn't we all make a lot of assumptions about what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse? And then as time progresses and the information is actually released, we started to realize, oh, maybe the perspective I had on what actually happened was based off of a lack of information. It's boring in 2023 to not have takes on stuff like this, but I think it's something you got to think about. Before we hit the road on the Gallant Says podcast, a little bit of fun, huh? There was a moment in today's show on the radio, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5, where I went off on a tangent. The tangent was about Elsa from Frozen. Elsa from Frozen's the worst. Elsa from Frozen kills her sister for a little bit of time and has a big song that's essentially, fuck it, fuck it, fuck it, fuck it, you know, let it go. She's someone that, you know, back in like 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, probably should have been burned at the stake or put in jail for witchcraft, seeing as she doesn't have the ability to control it and is a menace to society and anybody around her. Someone put in a tweet that, hey, Paul, whoa, what do you think about like Rogue accidentally almost killing her first boyfriend? Maybe if someone who touches half of the world's population and they die, maybe someone with a problem like that should be locked up. Not for her own good, but for society's good. Just a thought. But anyway, Elsa sucks, and you know who else sucks? Gordon Bombay. You can see the long tweets that I have about both of them. But there's a lot of shitty protagonists in Disney movies. There's been a lot of them. We don't talk about it nearly enough. Aladdin. Massive liar. Aladdin wants Jasmine. Who wouldn't want Jasmine with those pants? He asks a genie to turn him into a prince, but then he loses himself along the way. Dude is lying to get laid, right? But Paul, who hasn't? I'm just saying. That is who he is. Some other folks, Disney heroes who low-key suck. How about Simba? You know, forget that Simba got his dad, Mufasa, killed and had Pride Rock essentially turned into the hood overnight when Scar took over. Forget all of that. He ran away from his problems. Hakuna Matata. It means no worries for the rest of your days. You're not worried at all what Scar is going to do to the Pride Land while you're gone? You piece of shit. Hey, Simba, get a fucking job. Grow up. This is the real world. You can't just run from your problems. And if you run from your problems, you, my friend, are a problem. Peter Pan. Again, get a job. Why don't you want to grow up? I mean, eventually you have to grow up. You don't have to grow up inside your mind. But at some point, you got to grow up, bro. I feel like there's a lot of Disney characters out there who actually suck. I feel like they need to be held accountable. I feel like they need, perhaps, to face justice for not doing what was necessary in their journey. Anyway, that's going to wrap up today's edition of the Gallant Says podcast. We're going to try to do this later in the afternoon or in the evening. I'm trying to figure out a time where people actually jump in. Once again, I am disappointed to say not a lot of people jumped in. It seems like the only times people jump into the conversation is if I put something that has to do with the Houston Texans in the title. So these are things that I'm going to work on in the future, but I appreciate the few of you who did tune into today's show. You can catch this thing 5 times a week. Twitch.tv/Gallant Says, YouTube.com/Paul Gallant, or on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Until tomorrow, which will also start at 7 o'clock Central Time. So long, farewell, have yourselves a wonderful